Hello out there, and taking a look today at a brand new release from the Kershaw launch series, and this is the Launch 11, and this is a knife that, although I'm not usually one for automatics, I only have one in my collection right now apart from this. I knew when I first saw this knife that I was gonna have to get it in hand because the design and just the look of it is just so appealing. It's just such a darn good looking knife, that is for sure. And it's a little bit on the small side maybe for some people, and honestly, as far as legality goes, that might be a good thing for an automatic for a lot of people. But for me, yeah, I just wanted to check it out. And so many of these USA made automatics from Kershaw, for me it always begs the question, like, why can't you make more manual knives in the the USA factories? And I've been looking for an excuse to get more of their USA made stuff. And here you have it, a beautiful knife like this. So let's get into some of the details, the specs, the things you need to be aware of when it comes to this model, starting with some size comparisons, because as you can see, guys, and honestly, the lighting and just the color of the knife, and it's really not agreeing with me right now, so my apologies, but when you look at the overall size, it is not a large knife. We're talking about sub 7 inches total, like right around 6.75 inches in total length. So that puts our cutting edge at shy of 3 inches, so 2.75. So we're going to have some legality in a number of places, I'm sure, like big cities, Chicago, New York, still not going to be able to carry this. Whether autos are legal or not, it might be a little too long in some places. But for me, it's perfect. Sub 3 inches is, I think, the rule in my city for knives in general. And yeah, it works. Comparing it to, I think the perfect comparison actually is the Mini Griptilian. You take a look at the overall length, it's spot on. The cutting edge is pretty much spot on. There is a difference in the way these knives fit in hand, and we'll get back to that in a bit as well when we talk about the ergonomics. But that is a very good comparison. Let's bring in some other Kershaws. One thing I thought when I first saw the 11 here is it is such a Kershaw-y design. Like, the blade is a Kershaw blade, and I couldn't think of a single model that has this exact blade shape, but it just seems so reminiscent of a good many different designs. And that was the dividend. Here is the mixtape, a little more budget version of a knife. Has that same kind of cutout, though, that this one has, so that's sort of interesting. Let's see, what else? Where's that ZT? I had that. Yeah, here's the ZT0770CF, and both of these knives have a sort of similar kind of blade shape that I really like, where, on this knife, on the 11, it's angular, but on the 0770, it's like a plunge down to that tip, and then you have a very nice little belly. And yeah, you have a good belly on the Launch 11 here as well. All right, getting into the weight, we do not have any liners. This is just an aluminum frame, no liners, and so we're going to be very light on the weight here, coming in at 2.25. So yeah, very good, very agreeable. So not a lot that's adding extra ounces to this knife. Let's stick with the blade for a minute, though, and talk about these materials. So what we have is a blade of CPM 154. CPM 154 is the powdered version of 154 CM. I am very much aware that the structure is a lot more solid than on the 154 CM, but as far as performance goes, I've had knives of both steels, haven't really noticed a difference between the two of them. But I really do like the steel. CPM 154, 154 CM, whichever one it is, it works really well for me. Good steel to use. Relatively easy steel to maintain too. It's not super hard to the point where you're not in that ultra premium range where you're going to need a lot of sharpening experience to keep an edge on this. So it's good, sort of right there in the sweet spot for performance and maintenance. Looking at the blade, I am very impressed with just the stonewash. I mean, it's pretty. It's got that like black wash finish. So every which way that the light hits it, it just gets prettier. So like, you really can't have a problem with that. Little bit of billboarding here, but the way Kershaw does it for me is usually very good. And this side, Kershaw Auto, looking good. All right, now let's talk about some of the functional aspects of the blade. So this does have a flat grind, and when we look at the spine, it's not a particularly thick blade, and we do have a little bit of jimping. I mean, very little bit. You can count it. It's 5 jimps. Is that what you call them? Five jimps? But the thing about it, and you can probably see from this angle, it is actually deep, and it catches you like perfectly. Now, you just get caught right up in there, which is very important because there's a number of things ergonomically with this knife that could pose problems if it wasn't for the jimping really giving you the ability to lock in. It feels excellent because of that. You know, and it's not sharp jimping either. It just holds you and you're in, and that's pretty much perfect. As we move on back, let's take a look at this scale here. So we're dealing with pure aluminum, a little bit of a powder coating, but some aluminum will bead up a little bit, like BEAD, as in like sweat, whenever you use it if you have sweaty hands. My hands do tend to sweat a little bit. Some models it becomes an issue with, some it doesn't. You know, when I use my 943, if I use this knife a lot, like sometimes there's wet spots on it after I'm done if I'm like outside in the heat. So, you know, that can happen. Is that going to happen on a knife like this? Potentially, yeah, it could. So it's something that if you've never had aluminum and this is a knife that you really want to use a lot, like just be aware of stuff like that. You know, I've noticed it's just warm in this room right now where like I've noticed it just over the course of like messing around with the knife and filming the video that, yeah, it's happened just a little bit. So one of those things. We do have, I don't know if this is just a speed hole or just a hole for show. It definitely does, I'm sure, help with the weight, keeping it as low as it is. Doesn't have any kind of structural, you know, benefit or anything. And there's nothing like that you see through. You know, there's nothing on the blade that you see when it's like that. It's just sort of there. And I honestly like it. It doesn't take away from anything with the knife, and it does add just a little bit of a design, like innovative kind of like flair to it that is a welcome one. All right, and then continuing to move on back, here it is in the closed position actually. Let's just take a look at that. Very nice centering, a lot of good quality execution. Another thing to note is when you look at the show side here, there are no screws. There's no body screws on this side. You know, so our body screws, and we're going to have to pop it back open. So our body screws, there's 2 of them, you know, and they go through and basically not really having a spacer, just having almost like a clamshell kind of construction. There you go. Having like a clamshell kind of construction, they go all the way through, and then, you know, they don't pop out the other side. So you have a very clean look on this side, which is good. And it also makes it interesting because they could have gone completely clean and not made this reversible, but obviously the priority of Kershaw was to make this clip reversible and make it agreeable for lefties. So very good on them to do that. The clip is not really deep carry. In the short time that I've had this knife, it's been agreeable, hasn't been a problem at all. I don't really need the deepest carry, and I don't know, a small knife like this, I would like it to be maybe a little bit deeper, but not enough to the point where I would complain about it. I do think, though, that the screw holes line up in a way that some other Kershaw pocket clips would work, but this one is very thin. You know, it's a thinner style of clip, and while other ones might fit, it just might not look good. So I think I'm just going to keep it as is and not really mess with it. All right. So now let's talk about the action and the automatic aspect of the knife and the lockup. So autos, especially the OTF autos that I've experienced, a lot of them have, well, let's be real, almost all of them have play. So that's one of the reasons why those really aren't my thing. Some of the other autos, the push button ones like this that I've have had play. This knife is, I mean, it is not moving at all. So the fact that the action is very snappy, you know, really good and snappy, and the lockup is flawless, that says a lot. Another thing about that action, and in my experience with Kershaw launches and a number of other autos as well. And I actually just talked about this in my knife sale video because I had a Launch 3, I think, that I was selling. I think it was a Launch 3. I get the numbers confused. I had that Launch 3. Some of them in the past that I've experienced, they fire so hard that when they hit the stop pin, they bounce off the stop pin sometimes, and they don't engage. I haven't seen that with this knife at all. You know, my old Launch 3, I was able to, actually, I knew, depending on how I held it, like with gravity, that if I fired it at this angle, it was going to bounce and it wouldn't lock up. Haven't seen that at all with this knife. So that's definitely a good thing. I don't know if that's just Kershaw improving or what the deal is, but yeah, definitely what you want to see when it comes to lockup and that action. Really like the action.
And now for 30 seconds of unadulterated automatic action. All right.
One thing that people worry about when they are sort of new to automatic knives, and it's something that honestly that just because I didn't know better, I had a concern with at one point, and people think about it with assisted opening knives too sometimes, is that they worry about knives getting deployed in their pocket. And while this is something that can happen, and it's happened on certain models that that I've seen, and I have had experience with it, just that fluke kind of thing that happens. It's very rare. And what I did with this knife as soon as I got it was I just tried to test what it would take for this to be deployed. And you can see it, maybe you heard that just then. So I brushed my finger over it, my thumb over it, and it popped a little bit, but it didn't deploy. And I'm left-handed, and so, I just did it again. You can hear that. It is not, see, there you go. That was just like a missed push, and it clicked, but it didn't fire. And so it does take this very intentional push in order to actuate it, which is good. It's exactly what you want. It's easy to actuate, but it's not something that I think could happen accidentally. When you look at the way that it's going to be in your pocket, right? This part right here will be pushing basically against your leg, but in order to get the pressure, you see, in order to get the pressure down to actually fire it all the way, it has to be concerted right on that spot. And so even if there is a little bit of pressure, I think you're going to be just fine. I have zero worries about that. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is sort of getting back into ergonomics and the way that the knife fits in the hand, because for me, that sort of tells me that this knife isn't going to be for everyone. A lot of people who like autos use them for tactical reasons or have them for tactical purposes, want them for tactical purposes. A smaller knife really might not apply for that. Maybe as a backup, sure, but a lot of people are looking for larger things in general. And I think that if you are someone with even remotely large hands, that this knife might be a little bit of a struggle for you. I said it earlier that the jimping really was the saving grace for the ergos on this knife because, yeah, the aluminum can be a little bit slick, but also just the way that the space is used makes it a little bit difficult to really get, the best kind of comfortable purchase. It might take a second. The Mini Griptilian, which we had earlier out here, which is almost the exact same size, it fits in my hand a whole lot better. A whole lot better. 4 fingers, perfect. Right up the ramp, we're good. Everything is really, really good with this knife. But here, there's just the shape of it and the way that the space is used, just the curvature being different. It isn't quite as comfortable. It takes a little bit more time. And yeah, I think that if you have even full medium to large hands, that this will be one that maybe you'd keep it as a backup knife or relegate it to something like that. But you might be better off with a larger version or one of the larger launch knives that's out there. This one for me is pretty close to perfect, but almost a little bit on the small side. So we'll just throw that out there. Overall, though, I mean, these things come in at sub $100 with the materials that they're using, USA made Kershaw. The quality that I'm seeing here and the looks, I definitely see the value. You know, the launch series as a whole has always been one that was high value, at least in my opinion, if you were into the design and the models, just because the price point seems to be there, USA made. Yeah, I've never really had a problem with any of them as far as the pricing goes. And this one, just being as good looking as it is, just really hits a home run for me. So I'm excited about it. You know, I hope it turns out to be one that sticks around and that I get a lot of use out of, and something I can follow up with you guys with later on in the future. All right, but any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, definitely let me know. What are your thoughts on automatic knives, guys? Do you like them? Do you have any? What are you looking for in an auto? And what's your reason for preferring an auto if you do? All right, thanks for watching. Take care and have a good one.